The Ukraine war. It's a humanitarian war. It's about helping people. And it's all because of that bastard Putin. There's no US imperialist agenda at play, right? Hello there, you 5.7 million awakening wonders. What a voyage we are on together in truth. How we awaken, how the bright spark within each of us continues to illumine till the world itself is aglow with our new glory. If you don't subscribe yet, subscribe right now. Turn on that notification bell. It's vital that we stay connected. Should we find ourselves departing, we need you to subscribe to the mailing list. Now, the war between Ukraine and Russia rolls on, and while it's evident to most people that Putin is an imperialist and a warmonger, those are the kind of words you want to hear me say about that. You know, I'm happy to say those words, and that the people of Ukraine should be supported, loved, as all the war-weary and embattled people of the world surely ought be. It seems that through NATO, through ongoing encroachment, provocation, and long-standing neoliberal geopolitical objectives, there is more to this story that meets the eye. Wouldn't you like the whole truth? Can you handle the whole truth? Or do you just want to be spoon-fed gruel by mummy and daddy, kept dumb and numb in your little mind prison staring at a screen? Me, I want to be awake. It's painful to be awake. I spoke to Maté. Maté has been called a conspiracy theorist. He's also a prize-winning journalist, and his investigations and work on the Ukraine conflict are very revealing. Like all of us, he is incredibly sympathetic to the people that are actually suffering as a result of this war. Like all of us, he understands that Putin has his own agenda and objectives, but to understand this situation more fully, we have to look at the complete picture. He talks about NATO expansionism, he talks about ongoing provocation, he talks about the 2014 coup. Have a listen to this conversation. At the end of it, you're going to be a bit cleverer. For a long time, you've known something wasn't right. We are going to help you to understand exactly what it is. Stay to the end of the video and comment below because we need to know what you think.
The first thing I wanted to ask you about, mate, was I wanted to ask you about the media reporting of the Ukraine war. If it is indeed a US proxy war, what do you imagine that the goals are? Do you see it as a resource war? And as I imagine, for much of our conversation, I guess we're going to be talking about news and the reporting of news, misinformation and disinformation, who benefits from stories being told in a particular way, and who are the participants that coalesce around these new establishment principles that seem to be connected somewhat to corporatism, somewhat to globalism, somewhat to censorship. You know, and I guess the Ukraine war is a good place to start. Do you see it as a US proxy war, and what do you see as the goals of that proxy war?
I absolutely think it's a US proxy war, and the goals to me have been made pretty explicit. Going back to 2013. The fall of 2013, a guy named Carl Gershman, I think I'm getting his name right. He was the head at the time of something called the National Endowment for Democracy, which is a US government-funded organization that essentially helps carry out US foreign policy goals abroad, which center around enforcing US hegemony and destabilizing governments that stand in the way. So this guy, Carl Gershman, said in an op-ed in the Washington Post that Ukraine, quote, is the biggest prize. And what he meant by that is he explained that if Ukraine could be pulled into the US-led global order, then that could redound to Russia as well, and even lead to the overthrow of Vladimir Putin, because Ukraine is so important strategically and historically to Russia. And shortly after that, you had protests break out inside Ukraine against genuine corruption against this president Yanukovych. But the US and its allies exploited that and basically turned those protests into a coup, where Yanukovych, who was basically trying to play both sides, he was trying to be nice to both Russia and the US, he was overthrown. And he was replaced with a government that was stacked with people from the Ukraine's far right and was heavily favorable to the US. And in fact, there was a leaked phone call from Victoria Nuland, who was the top official in the Obama administration at the time. She's now back under Biden, where she is plotting with the US ambassador to Ukraine who the next government should be. And lo and behold, the person who they decided should be Ukraine's next prime minister, a guy named Yatsenyuk, he became the prime minister after this coup government took over. And so basically the goals then were to bring Ukraine into the US orbit and hope that that could further weaken Russia. And the reason why is simply because Russia, it's a top nuclear power. It's a longtime geopolitical foe of the US. And so it can act as a deterrent to US control of the world. And so I think in the thinking of these people, anybody who is a deterrent to US power needs to be destabilized and even overthrown. And that's why we've had in Ukraine this ensuing war for the last 8 years, where Russian speakers in the east of Ukraine, who didn't want to live under a coup government, especially after the new government essentially banned the Russian language, they rose up. And there's been a war in which Russia has been backing rebels in the east, and U.S. has been backing the government that it helped install. And that's a proxy war. And this proxy war escalated heavily when Putin in February of this year decided to invade and bring that war to an end. And that's why we've seen so much chaos and bloodshed since. But even in the process, the U.S. has made clear how committed they are to using Ukraine to weaken Russia with their statements. Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, said that our goal is to see Russia weakened, not to bring this war to an end. They want to use Ukraine essentially as cannon fodder to bleed Russia, much as Afghanistan was used in the 1980s to bleed the Soviet Union. And this has been made clear. Adam Schiff, who's a big Democratic hero in the U.S., 2 years ago, so 2 years before Russia invaded, he said, the United States aids Ukraine and her people so that we can fight Russia over there and we don't have to fight Russia over here. What he was saying there was that the U.S. was using Ukraine via the war that broke out in the Donbass to fight Russia over there. And so the obvious answer that I have to that is if you don't want to see Russia fight Ukraine over there, then we shouldn't be using Ukraine to fight Russia from here. But unfortunately, the dominant policy of the U.S. establishment is to use Ukraine as cannon fodder, and hence why we have the catastrophe that we have today.
It's difficult to argue with you, Aaron. You laid that out in a pretty easy to understand way. So it's not simply, there are these resources, there's this natural gas, there's these minerals, there's this fossil fuel. It's more of a geopolitical strategy to weaken a potential opponent in a region that's been unstable for a while. Surely the wouldn't the US government be aware of the potential catastrophic risks of such a strategy, i.e. Putin seems like he could be a pretty unstable dude, and if we take the mainstream media narrative that Putin is a tyrant, that this is a humanitarian war, which by the way seems ludicrous that we would even countenance believing that when everything you're explaining to me sounds like stuff I've heard before, like like in the example you gave, Afghanistan, an entrenched war that was sort of designed to last for a long time, certainly an analysis of Julian Assange among many others, and even the proxy war dynamic of two sides, the same two sides supporting dissident groups or coup d'etat leadership, or whether that's been in Vietnam or throughout Central and Latin America, sort of like just such a recognizable pattern. I'm astonished it can work as a template.
Thanks for staying to the end of that conversation. Did you enjoy it? Do you feel a little more illuminated? Who do you agree with? Me? Do you agree with Aaron, Maté? Do you agree with the mainstream media narrative? Do you want to know how the mainstream media, big corporations and the state got themselves enmeshed into these relationships where truth becomes an impossibility? What kind of independent journalism do we need to change at least the communicative aspect of this complex problem? What new social structures are we going to require? All of this I want from you in the comments. I'm sick of trying to overthrow the government. It's absolutely bloody exhausting. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe right now, turn on the notification bell. Right now, get your phone, turn on that notification bell, do it. Notify me, notify me. It's the only way we can be sure of connecting you, other than if you sign up to my mailing list, which I'd urge you to do after you watch one of these two videos, which are both fantastic and take us a little further down this line of inquiry. That mailing list there is your hotline to me. Whatever happens on this platform, we will remain connected if you sign up to it. I take you deeper into subjects I care about. I answer your personal questions. I tell you about live events. I keep you informed of my movements. Stay connected to us and stay free.